When you're poor in the country and nothing's in the budget, you can try your hardest, can't buy you justice. Wanna jump in the truck and go and grab the musket. That's what you call Bayou Justice. Bayou Justice. Bayou Justice. Who really knows the truth and can you really trust it? Bayou Justice. Bayou Justice. You can try your hardest, can't buy you justice.
One year ago this week, yesterday, in fact, Allie Rice, an LSU senior, was gunned down on Government Street in Baton Rouge. Many at the beginning, police officers thought it was a carjacking gone wrong. Others theorized that perhaps it was gang activity. Perhaps someone wanted to kidnap Allie. A lot of speculation, a lot of discussion. Today, as I look back and I think about the contradictions in the 911 calls that came in that night, I'm wondering if the answer to who killed Allie Rice is something altogether different.
And excitement there. Today's game played a part of what was an emotional day for the family of Allie Rice. You may remember the LSU student was shot and killed last year. Today, her loved ones came together for a special tribute. Miranda Thomas has that story.
The whole will always be there. The children will always miss what's been taken from them.
It's been 1 year since Allie Rice was murdered. Police say she was shot and killed at 2 in the morning while sitting in her car, waiting for a train to pass on Government Street.
You know, it's a mix of emotions. It's going from frustration to disappointment to...
That's Allie's dad, Paul Rice. He spent the day with loved ones honoring her life and legacy and says she was the glue that held their family together.
You know, she loved to tell jokes. She loved to laugh. That's what everybody remembers about her, is her smile and her laugh and her energy. And, you know, we just haven't had that for the last year.
We're the Shed. We're family here. She was part of the family. We miss her dearly.
People over at the Shed in Baton Rouge say she was a popular bartender, so they created something special in her name.
She was a whiskey drinker, and we have a special drink in her honor. We have both a shot as well as a regular-sized drink in her honor.
Over the past year, Allie's death made multiple headlines, catching the attention of an entire community.
Just being able to walk around town and see our yellow bracelets everywhere.
And police are still searching for her killer, offering a $50,000 reward for anyone who can help find them.
I don't know why these killers are being protected. I do firmly believe that somebody out there knows who did this, why they did it, how they did it, everything, but they're not coming forward with this information.
Until then, her loved ones will continue to fight for justice and ensure Allie's name lives on. In Baton Rouge, Miranda Thomas, WAFB 9 News.
Let's talk a little weather now.
So, Paul, that's Allie's dad. I talked to him a couple of times last January and into February, and I know the family was hopeful at that time. So it really is heartbreaking to be here a year after Allie's murder and find out that we're not any further along than we are. Tonight, we are broadcasting live. We have a live chat. As Paul said, somebody knows something. And you hear me say that all the time. Somebody at least knows somebody who knows something. The secrets are out there. So just one little clue, something that you saw or heard that night may help us. It may help the police. If you don't want to contact me, contact the police, but share your information, at least anonymously, to somebody. Crime Stoppers is out there. They're offering a reward still. That $50,000 reward is still there to anyone who can help them find the murderer of Allison Rice. And it could be more than one, by the way. We don't even know that. I'm going to start back. We're going to jump over, and I'm going to pull up I never touch a case until it's cold. I started writing about this in January, so a few months after the murder, when it seemed like we weren't making any progress, and I had the feeling that it was becoming a cold case. But honestly, I didn't want it. I didn't think that it would still be cold a year after the fact. I should mention, I get to know the families of victims in this line of work all the time. I've been writing the Bayou Justice newspaper column for God knows how long, 8 years or so. And I've been in journalism longer than that. So I always get to know the victims of families, the families of victims, rather. In this case, I actually knew Allie's mother long before Allie died. We used to work together in Baton Rouge. So it's just really, really disheartening to have this sort of thing happen. But anyway, like I said, I first wrote about this in January. And the column, the Bayou Justice column from yesterday, recaps much of the information that I published then. I've written about it more than once, and we're going to get into some of that stuff. But right now, just to kind of give you that overall view of what happened and what the police thought, what their theories were at the time, we're going to go through this column. And the headline yesterday, 1 year later, no arrest in Allie Rice murder. Co-workers described Allison Rice as having a delightful sense of humor. That was before someone unloaded a handgun into her car at a train crossing in Baton Rouge 1 year ago this week. 5 months later, police still had no leads or no suspects in the case, and Allie's father, Paul Rice, spoke with WBRZ TV on a Wednesday afternoon. Allie's family, he said, was hopeful that police would lead them to some semblance of closure. He said, "We are hoping that the continued exposure of Allie's photo and the reward, as I mentioned, $50,000, serves as a reminder of how important it is that we as a community speak up and not protect those who are out there doing harm." For Paul, this horror began at 4:45 in the morning on September 16th, 1922. 2 uniformed police officers knocked on his door. They came in, started asking him questions that morning, having a conversation. And Paul told People magazine, they kept mentioning Allie's name without telling me why. Finally, I asked, "Well, is Allie okay?" And that's when the policeman said, "No, sir. She's with the coroner right now. She didn't make it." Imagine, put yourself in Paul's shoes. Imagine if you were hearing that about your child. Allison Rice, a 21-year-old senior and marketing major at LSU, worked part-time at the Shed Barbecue that was near the campus. And around 2:19 that morning, driving home to her apartment, Allie stopped her silver SUV at a train crossing at the 1500 block of Government Street. Soon after, to avoid the train or to escape an attacker, she seemingly attempted to make a U-turn before someone shot her multiple times in the chest. A witness to the attack described the scene to journalist Kyron Chawla. This witness, by the way, is one of those who later said that they had called 911. They actually had also complained in a public forum the next day, all anonymously, that the police were not responsive to their story and to their information. But the witness said, and this was a witness that appeared on camera in shadow, so we couldn't see this person. We don't know this person's name. Witness says, I was bringing a friend home. When we got to the tracks on Government, the train had completely stopped. Then 2 guys walked past my car. One of them was wearing dark clothes with long sleeves. The other wore a red hoodie over his head. They were black males, maybe mid-20s, both around 5'10" or 5'11". At the time, he said, Allie's vehicle pulled up. So he's seeing, he says, he's parked this way. He's facing, Allie was facing west, he was facing east. So he's facing east across the tracks where she's going to park her car. And he sees 2 black guys in hoods, he says, in their 20s, walking in front of him, and then they cross the train tracks of where a stalled train was. They basically went between the cars and crossed the track. That's what this person says they saw. So at the time, Allie's vehicle pulled up. I was going away from downtown, driving east on Government, and Allie was coming towards downtown, driving west. When the 2 guys walked past my vehicle, the train was still at a complete stop. They were walking through the train cars to get across the tracks. Then, not 10 minutes later, I heard gunshots. I heard multiple gunshots, at least 5 or 6. And I could still see her car parked, of course, Allie's. As soon as the gunshots started, she tried to turn the car around, but stopped. I could not tell where the shots were coming from, but I knew they were very close, so I began backing out to leave. The next morning, I saw on the news that someone had been found dead by the tracks. That's when I recognized the silver SUV as the car I had seen the night before. And then that's when the person allegedly reached out to police and then eventually talked to Kyron Chawla and some other people, by the way. Baton Rouge police at the time suspected that this atrocity was a random act of violence. They considered it a failed carjacking attempt. 1 week after the murder and 1 day after Allie's funeral, there were 500 people in attendance, by the way. The commander of Baton Rouge PD's Violent Crime Unit, Lieutenant Kevin Hines, in a news conference, dismissed reports of gang violence, said that that's not what happened. There's a lot of things we're looking at that I'm not going to go over right now, he said. I understand there's a rumor that the murder was some kind of gang initiation. We have zero indication that that is the case at this time. Now, that was just the rumors that were going around campus at LSU, if you're wondering where that originated. However, with a dozen gangs reported active in Baton Rouge, some allegedly linked to a Texas-based drug cartel, the gang initiation theory originating among Allie's student brethren at LSU seems more plausible than BRPD's idea of random carjacking. Again, this is me originally writing back in January. According to witnesses, police found the driver's side window and front windshield blown out and bullet holes in both doors. A carjacker firing a dozen times, hitting both sides of a car that he plans to steal, seems unlikely. Furthermore, highwaymen rarely shoot drivers in the chest and in the arms multiple times. That's almost Usually when someone has been inflicted multiple times with injury, they usually think that's personal. Investigators usually think that someone may have known the victim. But that doesn't say that in this column. I'm just telling you that right now. The gunshots, the multiple gunshots to Allie's chest shattered all the glass in the vehicle. Again, the police said they thought they were trying to steal this vehicle. I mean, at this point, it's useless. You've destroyed the vehicle. I mean, it seems like even if you were intent on harming the driver, you'd make them get out first if you really wanted that vehicle. In that September news conference, Baton Rouge Mayor Sharon Weston Broome told reporters over the last 2 weeks, it's obvious that we've seen an influx of incidents. Firstly, she briefly referenced the murder of Allie Rice and others. Then she hinted at what sounded like a gang accusation. She said, we cannot turn a blind eye to continuous offenses by the same groups of individuals. So again, you wonder what fed those rumors. Well, that's part of it. I mean, in the same press conference where the police are saying, no gangs involved, the mayor insinuates that it's a group involved. So is a group a gang? I guess it's just a matter of how you read that word. Chief Murphy Paul urged anyone with information to come forward, telling reporters that the Baton Rouge Police Department took these incidents seriously. And I hate when they use the word incident. It's a lot more than an incident. In addition, he said, the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives were assisting in this investigation. I don't know if all of those folks all come out for carjackings, but I know that they often get involved with gang activity, especially if they think that human trafficking is involved. All right. Allie Rice's murder marked the 74th that year in East Baton Rouge Parish, following a string of crimes against LSU students. Someone shot another student, and on August 19th, this was an attempted robbery, and police investigated two separate kidnapping cases on the campus of LSU within days of this attack on Allie. Mayor Broome said she was coordinating with LSU officials to discuss the safety for all college students in the Baton Rouge area. And the university that week also awarded Allie's degree posthumously. I mean, she was a senior. She earned her degree. And in a news release, they encouraged Allie's classmates to seek grief counseling. And again, in yesterday's column, I reprinted most of this saying that today, September 16th, 2023, Allie's murderer had walked free for a year. That's frustrating. That's very frustrating. I'm gonna get into some of the other stuff that I have written and things that people have contacted me about. But let's jump over here and see what the chat's saying. Yeah, Lil, you're right. It's an old God situation for sure. And that's one thing. I say, well, somebody knows something. Well, God knows for sure. So no matter what, somebody's going to catch up with you, and that somebody's going to be God. AB said, did her cash tips get stolen? Did her cash tips get stolen? Oh, I don't know. She actually, I know when I wrote that first column, I was a little vague. I talked about her job and the fact that she worked in a job at a restaurant that was open late. And then I talked about the fact that she was shot at 2 a.m. it's easy to make the assumption that she was coming from work, but she wasn't. She was not. I don't recall the specifics. I think she had met a boyfriend or a friend of hers briefly. I don't know if they had dinner or what they had, but she was on her way home after that event. Ronald Ralston says, can't imagine ever getting the news about one of my kids. That's right. And that's to me, it's just, when I heard that, it just broke my heart because I could relate to Paul, and especially when they were beating around the bush and taking so long to get to the point. Tell me about my daughter. And then Ron says, did she have a boyfriend or ex that may have had a motive? And of course, you know, I mean, she's beautiful. She probably had many exes, but whether or not they have a motive, I do not know at this time. All right. So again, we'll jump back to the chat line if you have anything else you want to talk about or as the night progresses. But we're going to jump over again and continue with another column. The next one that I wrote, the headline was, and this is January 28th, 2023, BayouJustice.com. It said, the headline was, did human trafficking gang kill Allison Rice? After reading the recent Bayou Justice column on Louisiana State University student Allison Rice's murder, a retired Baton Rouge police officer contacted me with a theory. He suggested the carjackers described by Baton Rouge police destroyed Allie's SUV because they had no interest in the vehicle. The attackers, this police officer believes, planned to abduct Allie and only killed her when she attempted to escape. Although police have said they have no indication that the fatal shooting of Allie Rice resulted from gang violence, the former officer said she may have been the random victim of guerrilla pimps. And that's a term he says is known to police officers. Gang-affiliated privateers who kidnap women for sale to gangs or drug cartels abroad. He said this problem has existed for years in our area, hidden by officials not wanting to cause panic and negatively affect the revenue of downtown businesses. This retired lawman, his suggestion seemed preposterous at first until I verified some of his assertions. Look at this. The United Nations International Labor Organization defines sex trafficking as the second largest criminal enterprise in the world. And the Department of Justice's National Gang Center cites street gangs as North America's primary source of human trafficking. In 2022 alone, according to the Department of Justice, street gangs in the United States earned more than $150 billion with a B dollars from selling people. Let me say that again. In 2022, according to the DOJ, street gangs in the United States earned more than $150 billion selling people. In addition to that, Covenant Rescue, an international nonprofit measuring human trafficking in the United States, ranks Baton Rouge among its top 10 cities for human trafficking. So when you hear something like that and you say, as I did when I talked to the police officer, that's preposterous. We don't have that going on around here. It's going on around here. Paula Jones, a writer for Baton Rouge Proud, told Covenant Rescue, according to a 2021 report from Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services, an estimated 759 people, not children, not women, people, were victims of human trafficking in Louisiana. 530 of those 759 people were children. The report went on to say that 692 of the victims were female, 63 were male, and 4 were not gender identified. And by the way, that's not some, modern wokeness thing. They weren't identified because they couldn't tell from what was left of their bodies. The Department of Justice reports while gangs historically focused on drug trafficking and illegal weapons trade, gang involvement with human trafficking, one of the world's fastest growing criminal enterprises, has increased. Gangs today focus on coercing victims into sex trafficking, minimizing the risk of detection, and maximizing their profitability. Do you get what that's all about? It's safer to sell people than it is drugs. Last fall, BRPD Chief Murphy Paul spoke at a news conference following the attack on Allison Rice, and you've heard me write about this before, or read about this earlier tonight. Based on investigative intelligence, suggested and identified gangs in our city are looming. So, I take it back. So that's a different news conference where Chief Paul is talking about gangs. He went on to estimate the number of gangs in the city exceeded 8. But again, that's all just last year. This number is significant as city officials today seldom mention street gangs. Remember the mayor talking about groups? However, in a 2011 interview with the Advocate newspaper, the district attorney's office in Baton Rouge identified 11 active groups in the city, 11 gangs in the city. Assistant DA Otha Nelson identified 9 male-dominated gangs: Young Gorillas, City Boys with a Z, Baby Gorillas, Big Money Block Boys, Dumbway Boys, Big Dogs, Banks Town Mafia, Retarded Boys, and the Bottom Boys. They also said there were 2 unnamed female gangs in Baton Rouge. That was way back in 2011. This revelation prompted several studies on the subject. In 2013, the Baton Rouge Area Violence Elimination Project identified 30 Baton Rouge street gangs, 30 in 2013. And all of those groups totaled 500 members, according to their estimates. Ed Shadiah, a criminologist at LSU, refuted that number, though, concluding that Baton Rouge hosted at least 42 street gangs, again, in 2013. Last year, so 2021, from when this was written, 18th Judicial District Attorney Tony Clayton discussed the gang problem with the Baton Rouge Rotary Club. He called these groups the biggest catalyst for crime in East Baton Rouge Parish, as well as West Baton Rouge Parish, Iberville, and Point Capee parishes. He said, "We have kids on the street who are 12, 15, and 16 years old, and they have more guns than our cops." The DA is saying this. According to Clayton, gang leaders send juveniles to commit crimes because prison sentences are more severe for adults. You see how they piece this stuff together? They're creating rackets. I mean, it's cheaper to sell people than it is drugs. And it's cheaper from a prison term perspective if you send a child to do it instead of someone over 18. Lycian Stelter, a professor at American Military University, wrote this in 2021. Across the nation, there has been a dramatic rise in gang activity and gang-controlled sex trafficking rings. Gangs become sex traffickers because it is more profitable than narcotics or firearms with little or no financial investment. The resource, he wrote, and resources in quotes, is also a renewable resource. Gangs can resell women repeatedly. Running a profitable sex trafficking ring requires fewer people than running drug rings. Given those facts, the police officer's theory regarding Allie Rice's attempted abduction does seem plausible. However, the Fuller Project, established to debunk myths about human trafficking, reports that trafficking through abduction is uncommon. So no matter how popular human trafficking has become among gangs, this guy who conducted this study says, the human trafficking by abduction, grabbing somebody and forcing them into labor, is uncommon. It's something you only see in movies, according to him. The report explains, although there are cases of kidnapping and human trafficking operations, they are relatively rare. Unlike those in movies, only some victims are coerced or forced into trafficking. Instead, they report, organized crime gangs entice victims through drugs, job offerings, and con artists called Romeos who develop romantic relationships with their victims. Citing data from the respected Polaris Project, the Fuller Report also offers data supporting the retired officer's theory. Contrary to myth, the study determined most trafficked victims are adult, American-born citizens. And that's, of course, nullifying the stereotypical profile of these foreign-born juveniles that had been brought over here. Armed with these facts, I decided to revisit the circumstances of Allie Rice's death. Baton Rouge police described the attack as a random failed carjacking. But considering Allie's youth and beauty, her attackers may have wanted more than her sports utility vehicle. Allie, and again I state, a 21-year-old senior marketing major, worked part-time with her brothers, by the way, at the Shed Barbecue near LSU. Around 2:19 the morning of September 16th, driving westbound on Government Street, Allie stopped her silver SUV for a stalled train on the 1500 block. Now, I don't know how many times you've been there, but the place is almost deserted these days. But there are businesses in the area that are open. According to an eastbound eyewitness watching across the tracks, so this is again the person that Kyron Chawla had interviewed. Two men approached Allie from between the cars of the stopped train. Both men appear to be black males in their mid-20s or younger, standing nearly 6 foot tall, both dressed in dark clothing. One wore a red hoodie covering his face. Although the stopped train blocked much of the witness's view, the young men may have been attempting a conversation with Allie. Unfortunately, the witness could not determine any group affiliation for Allie's shooters, nor could he hear what the men asked of her. But evidently, Allie refused whatever they offered. Less than 10 minutes after the men approached, a volley of shots began near the front of Allie's car as she attempted to escape, her vehicle reversing in a half U-turn. And that's the position that they found the car in, and they could find the skid marks, and that's how the police totally agree that with that part of the story. That's what happened. Later, police found the college senior and her SUV riddled with bullets. Her attackers had fired, they discovered, at least a dozen times. A dozen times. Is that not overkill? Does that not seem like there's some emotion involved? I mean, I guess she could have said something to them to make them that angry, but that's very, very angry. That really seems personal to me. They destroyed Allie's car and killed Allie. The coroner found bullets in her chest and defensive wounds in her arms. So as they were shooting, she raised her arms as we would naturally do if we were being hit by something. According to witnesses, police found the SUV's driver's side window and front windshield blown completely out. Bullet holes were in both doors. Clearly, Allie's attackers had no interest in her car. For readers, again, this was from the column, not sold on gang-related human trafficking, there are other reasons criminals might be interested in Allie more than her vehicle. And then because this was what was happening at the time at 3 a.m, January 15th, about just not long after, before this column came out, 4 men left another LSU student, 19-year-old Madison Brooks of Covington, on a Baton Rouge highway where an oncoming car struck and killed her. Monday, January 23rd, the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office arrested those 4 guys and charged them with raping the sophomore before abandoning her on the roadway. So that was the second column. Now, after that was in print, my column is self-syndicated. It's in a handful of newspapers, most notably the Hammond Daily Star. But not long after it came out, I was contacted by 2 of the people who called 911 the night that Allie was shot. And so both of these columns had already been out when they called me. So I didn't have that information when this was written. And we'll talk about that information in just a minute. But before then, let's jump over to the chat line and see what we've got here. And those are just the ones we know about. That's right. When you start talking about people disappearing, being abducted, we only know about the ones that somebody's reported, all the time. Not only in the kidnapping realm, but in the murder realm, they find bodies and they say, or they find people when they, raid some house where there's human trafficking. They find people that no one even reported were missing. So yeah, there's a lot of that. And let's see, angry because she rejected them. Yeah, that is a reason. I don't know if it's a reason to waste that much ammo, because I'm sure she was gone after a couple of shots. So it's exhausting for me to talk about this case. It's frustrating, and so like so many cases, you hear me say that a lot, but some of these, it just seems like if we had the manpower, if we had more people on the police force, I don't know what, but if we had more focus on Allie Rice's case and many, many other cases, this is just the one we're talking about right now. If we had more focus, it wouldn't be that difficult to get to the bottom of it. So let's go through each of these theories. If it were a carjacking, if it were gang related, then there are folks that work. There's maps. I have a map of what gangs are in what area in Baton Rouge. It may not be the most current map, but the idea is these police task force, they know what's going on. They know what's where. I have a friend who retired from the Baton Rouge Police Department, and he spent most of his career on horseback going through downtown Baton Rouge. So they were close. They knew what was going on. They knew who was doing what. You need to pull those resources, or maybe ramp those resources up and hit the streets and find out what's going on. But if two random guys were walking through there and decided to hijack a car, well, chances are they randomly walk through that area a lot. So asking the right questions to the right people, police could have found out who that was. And if they are a member of a gang, they should have been able to find out who they work for, or, what gang are they in? Going back to that whole thing of the elder gang members sending the juveniles out to do the crime. These guys may not have been 20. But either way, they left there, and they would have left there if they had stolen a car or stolen a person or whatever they were going to do. They would have went and reported to somebody. You can't, if you're selling something illegally, you're selling it to somebody. So they, again, had a routine and somebody they were going to report to. So those are all leads that could have been followed up on. And maybe the police department did. But more often than not, our police departments are just simply too short. They just don't have enough people, or they have just too many crimes to check into. And maybe you're talking to the wrong people. If you're a detective and you're going out and you're investigating, well, go talk to that police officer on horseback. Go find out what he knows. Don't just walk the streets and drive around in your fancy car. Let's go talk to everybody and find that, kind of pool your knowledge. Everybody knows somebody who knows something. You just got to connect the dots and bring all that together. So now, let me return to my conversations, and I'll glance over here and see if we've got anything else in the chat. Maybe a little bit. Well, let's jump over there real quick. Yeah, it's Ron saying it does make some sense that traffickers would pick their victims from drug addicts, runaways, etc., instead of trying to kidnap college students. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And Lil Miranda says, anybody know why the train was stopped? I've been through there. I've been through there many, many times. I used to work for WYNK. That was down there at one point. I worked at Exxon for a while. Yeah, and plus I was a big Krispy Kreme fan. So I've been through that part of town late night more than once. And it seems like that happens all the time. I don't know if something is blocking them, or if they're unloading, or if there's some kind of problem with the trains. But it's a very good question, and I do not know the answer. I just know that it happens quite a bit. So here's the thing. Here's the thing that I haven't said a whole lot about. I haven't written about this because the people who reached out to me said, hey, don't use my name. Don't use my name. But I need you to know this because the information you have is wrong. So going back to the carjacking theory, going back to the human trafficking theory, going back to the gang involvement theory, those all hinder on the fact that two black guys crossed in front of a car and then went through two train cars to where Allie was standing. What if that person wasn't telling the truth? That person was anonymous. I mean, yes, somebody knows. I guess Kyron Chawla knows, and probably the police know who this person was. But were they telling the truth? You know, you only have one person's word that they saw this thing. And I take it back because they claim to have had a passenger. I later found out, even though it wasn't in the initial report, they had a passenger with them, allegedly, when they saw these two black guys. Now, what they said was they saw these guys go through, and then sometime later, the train had been sitting there a while. Could have been 10 minutes, could have been who knows how long, because the train was sitting there and they didn't leave. They didn't turn around, these people in this vehicle. They just sat there, and eventually they heard gunshots. And the next day, by their words, the next day they heard, oh, somebody was killed by those tracks. That's probably the people we saw. We don't know, A, that they're telling the truth, and two, we don't know if it happened at the same time. They may have, we don't know how long that train was stalled there. They saw those black guys go through. It may or may not have been when this happened to Allie. I know they said they heard the gunshots, and they heard the car attempt to make the U-turn. But here's the thing. Two people in the neighborhood, two very reliable witnesses who didn't call the next day. They called 911 that night to report the problem. Those people heard something entirely different. They weren't eyewitnesses, but they were ear witnesses. And they didn't want to get involved. They don't want any gangs or anybody else knocking on their door and coming to see them. And that's why I haven't shared their story until now. And I'm not going to tell you their names, but I do need to make it a point that something else happened that night after those gunshots. Now, keep in mind, they couldn't hear anybody walking between train cars. They did hear the stalled train, but that was, as I mentioned earlier, commonplace. They may or may not have heard Allie make a U-turn or attempt to make a U-turn with her car. But absolutely, positively, after those gunshots, they did hear a car rev up, peel tires, and leave that scene. A very loud vehicle. So it seems to me that the person who killed Allie Rice was likely in a vehicle behind her and not two random guys walking between train tracks at 2:00 in the morning. So you have to ask yourself, why did the first witness tell that story? Either they got their times mixed up, or those two guys that went through the cars were in cahoots with the person behind Allie. I don't know. Or perhaps they told a false story for a whole nother reason. If you were the person in the car behind Allie and you had a reason to fire multiple gunshots into her car, chances are you might tell someone to tell a different story so that no one suspects you. Just something to think about. I don't know. The reason I do the Bayou Justice newspaper column and the reason that we're here tonight is because somebody out there does know. And we need you to start talking. If not to me, talk to somebody else so that this family can see, as Paul said, some semblance of closure. And above all else, we can see some level of justice. Jumping real quick to the chat, see what else we've got here. Trains have blocked that area for years. Yes. And good point. Black guys in hoodies is really not a description. I totally agree with that. Thanks, everybody. During the month of October, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Barbara Blunt. And you guys have been writing me about these folks on death row that are trying to get off and trying to get released. So I will follow up on that next week.
When you're poor in the country and nothing's in the budget, you can try your hardest, can't buy you justice. Wanna jump in the truck and go and grab the musket. That's what you call Bayou Justice. Bayou Justice. Bayou Justice. Who really knows the truth and can you really trust it? Bayou Justice. Bayou Justice. You can try your hardest, can't buy you justice.